So welcome. Today we're kind of talking about our new podcast slash show that we're going to be putting on at the library. So we're talking, first off, my name's Tyler Sweat. I'm the Accessible Media Specialist at the Iowa Library for the Blind and Print Disabled. And my other person here is Leslie. Leslie, you want to say hi?
Hi everyone, my name's Leslie and I am the Special Services Librarian here at the library. I've probably talked to some of you on the phone a few times.
Yeah, so what we're kind of talking about is Library Chat, which is a new podcast show that we're going to be putting on. But also we're going to talk a lot about within this, we'll be reviewing books and especially podcasts throughout it. So today we kind of wanted to talk about like a podcast 101 is what we're calling it, kind of to explain what podcasts are, how to get them, and sort of how we'll be using them within the Library Chat format. So before we really dive into Library Chat, we're just going to kind of talk about podcasts and sort of what they are and where you can find them. So the first thing is, what is a podcast? And so I think the best way to describe it is like an internet radio show.
Right.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, kind of like on-demand radio online.
Yeah, exactly. Now, within that, what they're about is a topic that is at anything you could ever imagine. There's probably a podcast about it. Even the most random subjects you could ever find. Someone at some point has made a podcast about that for that specific.
Yeah, especially during this time of COVID where people are home, it seems like more and more podcasts have sprouted up with people just being at home and doing a podcast. So there are so many topics out there.
Yeah, and so throughout this, when we start looking at podcasts and reviewing them and listening to them, I think that we're going to try to pick as broad of topics and kind of really jump around just to make sure that we don't cover, one specific, because it is so broad that there's just a lot of content to kind of dive through.
Right.
So the next thing is, our podcast free? Now, about 99% of them are free. So most of the really popular ones are free. The only time you're going to find podcasts that cost any money, where some of them do like a paywall to listen to old episodes, or they have specific, on Patreon or Stitcher Premium, which I'm not going to dive into a whole lot, that you can listen to that are just, for like members only. But most of the time, they're going to be free.
Good.
Leslie, I'll let you take this one. Our podcast live.
So podcasts typically are not live. I believe there are a few that might be, but I would say the majority of them are not live. So they're recorded for you to listen to pretty much any time you want or have time to listen to them. So most of them are recorded.
Mm-hmm. And even, like sometimes podcasts do like special episodes where it's like, this is our 200th episode, so we're going to do a live stream on YouTube. But even that, they'll take it and still put it onto the other platforms for you to listen whenever you want. So even that is still, it's not, so yes and no, but most of the time they are not live yet, and you just listen to them whenever you want to.
Yeah.
As far as places to find podcasts, I'm going to kind of go over a couple of those. So the first place we're going to start is iTunes. So iTunes, you can get the iTunes, for your desktop computer. There's also a podcast app built into any iPhone or iPad that you're going to get. And from there, you can search around and kind of, these are, and now if on the left side here is all the podcasts that you're subscribed to. So this is literally all of the podcasts that I'm subscribed to. So yeah, so if you enjoy podcasts, there's about 20-ish. Now, some of them don't post regularly. So this one is just to prove like that there's a lot of different subjects. This one's called Talk Salad and Scrambled Eggs. So it's Kevin Smith, who's a director, and then another guy from The Nerdist who literally review Frasier episodes. They watch Frasier episodes and then talk about it. Yes. And they haven't posted in a couple of years, but I'm still subscribed to it in case they come back and start posting again. So there really is random topics that go everywhere as far as that. And the one that I have pulled up is Stuff You Should Know, which we'll kind of get back into later, because that's going to be the first podcast that we're going to kind of dive into with one of their episodes. Now, another platform is Spotify. So this is another one. It doesn't work on the Wi-Fi here. And they blocked it because it takes up a lot of streaming space. But they do have podcasts available that you can download and listen to. They are also free. Like, you don't have to have a Spotify account. You can just download this app and then use the free side of it. So with iTunes, there's going to be ads built into the podcast that the person will be putting on. So, but even with Spotify, same thing where sometimes there's ads built into them, or sponsors for that specific podcast. As far as and so that's those are two big ones. I'd say if you have an Android, Spotify's the way to go, and if you are on Apple Podcasts work pretty well. For me, there are a couple other options I can kind of show you guys. So Pocket Casts is one for Android especially, and there's a bunch of other ones that are like Google has their own podcast, and then the others like Castbox I've never used before, and Podbean is another one I've never really used before. But Pocket Cast is another big one. SoundCloud is another one that a lot of people can put stuff on, that it'll exist. But as far as like crisp and clean produced shows, it's going to be more iTunes and Spotify are going to be your big ones.
Yeah. And I found that if I know a title of a podcast, you can just do a quick Google search and it'll usually pop up and you can find it that way as well too.
Yes. So on these platforms to listen to them, you're just going to download them into the app. Spotify does have a phone app as well. Yeah. So you're going to download it and listen to it, or sometimes you can just stream it without having to download it on your phone if you don't have the space. So it is pretty easy to listen to these. So like even we go back to iTunes here, if you just click play within here, it's going to play it. It's not going to download it onto the computer. So you can play it and listen to it. But if you're going on like a road trip, you could download a bunch to your phone, for example, and do it that way. Do you have anything to add as far as like downloading or getting them on your device?
I don't think so. No.
Just trying to make sure I cover that. So that's kind of when we talk about Podcast 101, that's kind of like a good general overview of what they are and sort of what you can do with them. Now, if we click over here, we're going to kind of transition with a little bit of podcast, but more into library chat. So on our blog, iowalibrary.blog, right now, the first thing that pops up is our library news for October, which if you haven't listened to it, go ahead and give that a listen. But down here, at the bottom of the post, it says our Podcast 101 and Library Chat podcast. So click here. It's going to take you to a page that's talking about what we're in right now. That's kind of talking about that 101. But the main thing, if you scroll down here, it's also talking about the first library chat. So library chat, the way that we are doing this is sort of just like more of a conversation. So if we look at like library news, it's sort of these organized, just a lot of giving out information and giving book lists and those types of things. And we kind of want to build this more into a conversation around books and podcasts and other various topics.
Right. Yeah. So we'll have conversations and chats about books, reading. For example, the first one is Halloween. So just different Halloween traditions. So each month it'll be a different topic. And we'll just kind of chat about what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, our first one will be coming up on the week of October 19th. And so we're going to be, the topic of that chat is going to be Halloween. And so the podcast that we've picked is from Stuff You Should Know, and it's Where Did Trick-or-Treating Come From? And we will link it in here. I don't think it's linked in here, but I think it's linked on the other page, the Podcast 101 and Library Chat. And we'll link it on that other one as well. So there is a link to it because it came out October of last year is when this podcast came out. But it's just a really fun podcast that talks about trick-or-treating, talks about Halloween and kind of the history around it and sort of some of the traditions and other things that go along with it. The podcast is Stuff You Should Know. And so that it says here, the podcast launched in 2008 and covers a variety of topics in the field of science, history, urban legends, and pop culture. I really like that podcast. It's a fun one and it talks a lot about different topics and other things. So we did link it here. So before you listen to the library chat, we want you to listen to that podcast so you can kind of follow along with us. And as we kind of have a conversation about where did trick-or-treating come from episode. So yeah.
Yeah, it'll be lots of fun, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's all that I really have to talk about with the library chat. We're looking forward to it. I think it's an exciting kind of new podcast that we'll be putting out. And we'd love to have suggestions for future podcasts. I think we have the first kind of couple nailed down, but as we go through this, we want to hear from you guys, like what podcasts you listen to and sort of what you guys kind of want to hear about, or maybe one that we've never heard of that would be interesting for us to do on our.
Right, yeah. We would love to hear from you guys. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call the library, and whoever answers the phone should be able to help you figure out how to get to our podcast or find out what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that's all I got. So thanks, guys.
Thank you. See you guys later.